Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's longest running and largest show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman. Please make sure you're subscribed and that you're getting updates every single time an episode comes out. And today we're here with Dr. Amir Khoshnevis. So Amir sees patients in his practice in North Carolina, but he's probably best known for his role as the president and chief medical officer of Vision Source. And whether you call Vision Source a membership organization like Amir does, or is a single largest optical retailer like Vision Monday does, either way, I think Vision Source practices did something like $3 billion in sales last year. And I think the population of private optometrists is pretty representative among private practice, so we can all learn something from them. So I spent the episode getting Amir's take on trends in the industry, challenges he sees for the profession, and the opportunities for all of us to succeed together. We talked about technology as both a threat and an opportunity, a little bit of turf battles. We also talked about patient care as a priority. I think you're going to find the conversation interesting. I know I did. And before we jump in, I just want to remind everybody that I really appreciate your feedback. It absolutely helps me figure out ideas for future guests, future topics, helps me know what you like, what you don't like, and just helps me be a better resource for you. A lot of people reach out with questions, and I can tell you that it is our absolute pleasure to make sure that we address each and every one of the questions and comments that we get. So please reach out on the Power Practice website or on eugeneshatsman.com. And now to our conversation. All right, Dr. Amir Khoshnevis, welcome to the Power Hour. Excited to have you here.
Thank you, Eugene. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, so I think given your role and kind of an iconic role in the industry, I think it might be a good place to start for everyone to understand what you do and what vantage point you have.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I see myself as a servant leader that really has played the same role from the time I entered the profession, that is to elevate my profession and the colleagues. But today, I serve as president and chief medical officer of Vision Source, a role that is 26 years in the making.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what is it that you really do and what kind of exposure do you have to the industry? What kind of things can you see that other people don't really get a chance to see if they're running a private practice?
Well, I think that I have the incredible opportunity to listen to over 3,000 practices that are part of our network. And because we're so connected and because we collaborate so much and talk so much, that the volume of information that's hitting my desk is quite heavy. But I get to at least get a feel for what's happening to private practice, to the profession, and the challenges that are ahead of us. And then I work closely with the industry partners that give a lot of value to our members, but are also basically locking arms with us to try to solve for the challenges that we see. So to be honest, the most important thing that I think that I get to do today is to worry about what's next and continue to make sure that we're pointing in the right direction as a profession and as our segment of the profession, I should say. And that strategy role allows me to be a doctor and relevant to the people we serve, while I think in a bigger scale, think about the impact that we're having on patients and the profession.
Yeah. And, it seems to me then if all of these things are hitting your inbox, you get a chance to see the successes, what are the practices doing that are most successful in the industry. You also get a chance to see all the gripes, all the threats, right? And possibly a lot of the opportunities. And so that's the vantage point that I really want to try to drill down into today and hear a little bit more about the types of things that you're seeing. So, maybe we'll start with the advice for practices piece. If you were to take the things that are making practices successful that are part of your membership, and you were to try to extrapolate and say, you got a private practitioner, they're excited about what they're doing, but they may be hitting some challenges, the common challenges that exist in the industry today. What kind of advice would you offer them? And let's talk through some of those challenges that they might be up against too.
Yeah, happy to. One of my favorite things to talk about is the power of collaboration with colleagues. I think that one piece of advice I would give anyone is the advice that I received when I first came out of school and I opened my practice. My attorney, I'll never forget, said to me that most professionals will come out of school and their learning curve just basically flattens. And so they practice about the same level for the rest of their career. And to avoid that, you want to surround yourself with a community that's willing to dig deep, that is beyond the meeting each other at a meeting and taking CE together. But you really need to be able to let your guard down and allow other doctors within the area to become part of your life. And as you collaborate, you not only improve your offering and your practice, but almost just as importantly, you continue to learn how to better care for patients. Because at the end of the day, our success will be determined by how well we drive value to the patients we serve, right? And I think collaboration is key. It's great to be the king or queen of your island, but it's even better when you're surrounded by docs who will share with you openly what they're doing well and what they're not doing well. So that's my first piece of advice: is don't be on an island.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And honestly, we've heard this 1,000 times, but if you're in the room where you're the smartest person in that room, then you're probably in the wrong room. So go find another room, right? And that's where
right.
the collaboration comes in. What else?
So as we're really learning from our network, one of the opportunities we're going to face is understanding the patient base that we currently serve, and then leveraging data as well as a deep understanding of the types of patients that you're seeing, and pivoting in order to meet the needs of those patients at a greater level. I really believe that it's our responsibility as optometrists to be the doctor who thinks about the totality of the patient that we're caring for, not just their eye exam or the needs that they walk in with. I jokingly said this to my colleague, Chris Wolf, is that chief complaints are the best thing ever, and they're the worst thing ever when it comes to actual patient outcomes. It's like you can focus on just solving for the problem in front of you, or you can solve for far greater challenges the patient's facing that are not even talking about, or they will face in the future if you take time to focus on the totality of the patient in front of you. And it's our responsibility to do that. So my advice would be really focus on the patient and the types of patients you're seeing, and look back at your practice and look for opportunities where you can be better at serving the patient's needs. And that might require changes in your structure, in your technology offering. But I often find that we're only dealing with the patients on the record today, or the ones that are coming in, right? We're not really thinking about how do I be the best I can be for everyone that I'm seeing.
Well, and so let me ask you, give me some examples of things that you think are commonly missed when people aren't following that advice.
It's going to be a very general comment. Obviously, I know many of my colleagues will think this is not them that we're talking about here, or I probably have made those same mistakes myself. But I think that as you get busier, and many of us are fortunate enough to have very busy schedules, it's natural to start defaulting to the pain of the moment, the patient's chief complaint, or a desire to just come in for a comprehensive eye exam. Where we are starting to explore a vision source with the help of our colleagues is really understanding what should be the propensity of disease and conditions that are commonly found in our society, and are we addressing those at a relatively normal level, right? So if we're caring for patients, and if you look back for the last month and all you've done is a lot of refractions and eye exams, and your codes, generally speaking, are very much a vision-related complaint. My question is, have you really become a machine to drive the eye exams and grow the practice, or are we looking at the patient through a different set of eyes? Am I looking at the conditions that they could be facing? Are we looking at the total health of the patient and saying, should we be having a bigger discussion about taking better care of themselves through our findings? But I think Are
you talking about like dry eye or diabetes or, like glaucoma? Where are you?
Thank you. You're driving me to a specific. So I think you just let's take dry eyes, for example. How many times do we see a patient that probably has some signs but maybe not symptomatic. And because I'm busy, I may not bring it up and I may not talk about it much, right? And this happens all the time. But I think it's because we're also ill prepared to handle what's next for that patient. How do I schedule that? Do I really want to go down that road? Is it worth my time? Are we having the right conversations with patients about solving for the problems that they're likely to have soon? And are we the place they should be coming to for more than just their vision needs?
Got it. So you're thinking about the future of the patient, but you're also thinking, do we are we including things like a speed test in our diagnostics versus just going through a lower level of screening and maybe just the stuff that we've always done for 20, 30 years?
Yeah, and I'll say it more broadly. Honestly, I find myself really aware of the fact that we have an aging population that has significant increase in need for the type of care that we provide very well. And we just have to be prepared for that, right? So we have to look at ourselves and say, have we evolved the way that we care to be able to meet that need? Or are we going to be the group that continues to do routine care and we leave a void for that patient, and that void is going to be filled by someone. So if you have patients who have greater number of AMD, glaucoma, and cataracts that are walking through your door, and diabetes and all the metabolic risks they carry, are you prepared to see those patients and then follow up medically with them, or are we going to allow for someone else to fill that void?
Yeah, so I think that you're actually hitting on a really important point from the medical side of the equation. And how do you see? I mean, you mentioned 26 years. How have things changed when it comes to optometrists providing medical care over the course of your career? And also, where do you see this going?
So one of the great things that happened during my career is that I started with a practice that really prided itself in being a high refractive practice. It was very much the boutique model. And over the years, as my patient population aged with me, I realized that there is a real opportunity for me to continue to build that side of my care. But that was a gateway for me to be able to reach those patients and to take better care of them. So as we started doing more specialty contact lenses, we started to bring in dry therapy, and then evolved and continued to evolve with our patients where we took care of more glaucoma and more AMD, and with the technology evolution that we've been a part of in my career, the advent of OCTs and improvement in diagnostic capacity through imaging. What we found is that the diagnostic portion of our exam really shifted toward the health aspect of care. So we would have a health conversation more at the front end of the eye exam. And it wasn't, oh, by the way, but I found myself actually often starting with their image reviews before we would get into even the refractive part of the eye exam. So one of the ways that we really solve for this challenge is that we want the patient to understand we're going to look at their entire care. And yes, by the way, you have a refractive need and we're going to solve for that. And here's a solution that's going to meet that, and not take care of the refractive and look for something else on the back end.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, actually, while we're on this topic of your practice, give everybody a little bit of background of, how you got into optometry in the first place, and, maybe quick little career snippet of how you got from starting a practice, as you talked about, to now doing what you're doing today. And you still see patients, right?
I do. Not as much as I want to, but certainly it's an important part of understanding our doctors, understanding what they're going through. I want to remain relevant, but I'm also passionate about patients and realize every time I see patients, it feeds a side of me that really keeps me excited about optometry and the future of care. But to answer your question, I'm a son of a celebrated OBGYN who practiced and was educated in the U.S., practiced overseas, came back to the U.S. and finished his career here. a very trying immigrant story, but I won't get into that. But when he came here, he settled in small town North Carolina because there was a great need for providers in small town areas. And he was able to bridge the gap of culture and whatever. Small town North Carolina, seeing a guy named Khoshnevis was seemed like a daunting task, but very quickly he became a real standout member of the community because he believed wholeheartedly that if you care for people, that if you have a gift of delivering care, you transcend all of the differences between us. That if you can deliver a baby, healthy baby, and hand it to a mom, all of a sudden you're a rock star in their eyes. And
Yeah.
that led to a strong belief in private practice because he always shared with me that the greatest gift of being a private practitioner is that you hold the ultimate responsibility to the patient. That there's no one else telling you how to practice, that the patient is the center of your focus. And if you do the right things, then everything else will take care of itself for you financially and otherwise. That led me to optometry school, not because my dad was an OBGYN, but truly I got hit in the eye when I was a competitive tennis player and my optometrist took care of me and I had hyphema and significant eye issues. And it opened my eyes, pun intended, to optometry.
Yeah, right.
And I decided to go to optometry school, and it was very clear to me that I was going to be a private practitioner. So I came out and sought an opportunity with a group practice. It was an amazing practice. And then a few years in, like many others, I realized I wasn't going to be an owner because the structure just wasn't set for that. And in a bold move, I made an offer to buy one of the locations, paid too much for it, but I always, knew I could trust in myself to grow the practice, and very quickly doubled the size of the practice and opened another one. So I bought one, opened one, and I happened to open it in 2007. And I think you know what happened after that. It was a bit of a Taj Mahal of a practice too. But today, it's our bigger practice. It's our more successful practice. So it all worked out. So 2 locations in Charlotte, North Carolina, both private, both Vision Source practices, and really proud of them. They are full scope, very low volume, high touch, relationship based practices.
Yeah. So what made you decide to go from running a practice to, I assume that you ascended through the Vision Source organization in one way or another. What made you decide to start sharing some of the things that you were doing?
Yeah, I think very quickly I realized that the greatest gift I had received was a colleague who reached out to me after I opened my practice and said, "Hey, anything you want, I'm happy to do that for you. You're not my competitor. Let's win together as private practitioners." That was an aha moment and one that I took to heart. After that, I joined Vision Source sometime later and realized that when I got together with my colleagues, that there was a great deal of sharing and learning that happened that I absolutely loved. And it was powerful to grow the practice that way. I started just naturally reaching out to other colleagues and sharing what we were doing. And along the way, Vision Source identified me as someone that can help them to reach more ODs in North Carolina. And I served in the role of a local leader for a period of time.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And Amir, as you were talking about that, a thought hit my mind. Is there anything in particular in your practice that you were doing that people were absolutely, and I'm just thinking about tips for the audience or things that, in the day-to-day of practice that you were doing that really, truly caught other people as remarkable?
Well, I don't know about that, but I will tell you that I think that my colleagues always appreciated the fact that I was very passionate about doing things the right way. I was very passionate about a level of excellence in culture. So I really hung my hat on developing the staff and the team and the way that we would care for patients. In my eyes, the most important thing we could do is to deliver that red carpet experience to our patients, not just in the experience, but in also outcomes. I felt that it was our responsibility to have a patient feel like this is the place that I must go to. And I feel that I have great trust with the providers, and the staff is an extension of me. So I really wanted to share my passion for building a culture of excellence And that was my passion in the early days, because I felt like the team was necessary to win. But they gave me an opportunity to speak to my colleagues very frankly about their practices. They would ask me to come in and spend time with them, and I would ask for the same. And it's a great gift, right? When you get a colleague through the door who can tell you what you're not seeing, your blind spots,
Yeah.
the dead tree in the front that you haven't paid attention to, or it's amazing. But also just the way that the staff was treating them. We do a lot of mystery shoppers and things like that. So
Yeah, that actually is something, from a mystery shop standpoint. I noticed that if you ask a few of your friends to just call your practice, and we do this for clients all the time, is we'll just call their practice and we'll try 5 different phone calls and ask 5 different questions. And, sometimes they think they're doing a great job, and it turns out that some of the people that they might hear are doing a great job and some of the people aren't. And whether that's a call your practice or walk into your practice, or, don't tell anyone who you are, but, just kind of go hang out at the practice and go through the whole process, you get some really valuable insights from doing the whole secret shopper thing.
yeah, I mean, one of the beauties of getting together with colleagues every month is we get a chance to do these things regularly. It's not by chance, it's by design that we collaborate at that level. And honestly, it's the greatest opportunity to grow, is to just be consistently working with a group of folks that you're willing to share your wins and losses with. And I got to tell you, it's funny. If you called my practice, probably every other call, we probably won't handle it exactly the way I hope we would handle it. But that's every practice, right? It's not the whole practice isn't good or bad. It's how do you identify those weak spots and try to solve for them. And so phone training and all that stuff is all critical components. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about this now, because, going back up to the vantage point that you have, you're seeing the biggest challenges that practices are facing on a daily basis, right? You hear people asking for solutions, but, what are they from your vantage point? What are the challenges first? And how is and really, how is the industry doing this year?
yeah, so, over the last couple of years, as I've taken on more of a broader view of Vision Source instead of a local view, I started to understand that from a strategy perspective, we had to solve for the big challenges, because you can solve for the small challenges locally, but the big challenges, the macro challenges, they're really staffing was obviously everyone's concern, especially post-pandemic. I think that in our world, I can only speak for the Vision Source world, we've seen a stabilization of that, and we've gotten through the rough part, and we've now retrained and retained some really great people. And there's really positive energy in having great staff again. Thank goodness. But that will always be a challenge for us. How do you develop staff? How do you make sure that there's not a lot of encroachment, that as soon as you develop them, they end up walking through the door? And as I've always said to people, it's still better to have a really smart person who works there for a while and leaves than a really dumb person who stays there forever, right? I mean, it's okay. You can develop them. But the number one challenge right now for the network, we have well over 500 practices who raised their hand that said, I need an associate or I need a doctor to enter my practice for reasons of, patient demand, but also potentially expansion and then transitioning their practices. So that's our biggest challenge, and the one we're looking to solve. And we're really excited about being able to do that.
Yeah. How do you solve that? I mean, that is there's lots of practices out there that want extra help. And it seems like the optometry, the landscape today is challenging for doctors to find associates.
You know what? It took us a couple of years, but we finally developed a program that we're really excited about. The idea is that when you visit with the schools, you would realize a lot of students raise their hand and say, I want to work in private practice, but the financials don't work for them. So they'll take a job working elsewhere, thinking I'll get into private practice, but we always know that once you put the anchor down, it's tough to leave. So what we aim to do is to solve for that by investing through our partnership of companies. We're investing in those practices in the form of a student debt repayment program, what we're calling affectionately OD Associate Placement Program, because it's so simple. Is we'll award a practice up to $150,000 of debt relief to be able to recruit someone to come to their practices. It's highly effective way of getting students to say yes. They still have a competitive salary. They still get the same benefits of working in private practice, but we can back our member practices with some funds to help them grow and bring someone in. It really drives value to the entire ecosystem. We have a student who now believes in private practice. Again, I can work there. We have a practice that grows and prospers and remains, because one of our challenges is that we're going to lose practices, especially in rural America, where they'll close the door and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible for the profession. And then access to care becomes a problem. And then it also drives value all the way through the entire ecosystem of all the businesses that rely on that practice, right? But patients are served now in a more advanced way too, because we know our young docs are coming out are pricing at the highest level, and they're the best educated ever. So it works to serve the patient and everyone else.
It's interesting. You mentioned rural America. I think that's where the hardest, it's hardest to recruit for rural America. And it also seems to me like that's the part where you have to be thinking long-term and strategically about your practice the most. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so we have, we've realized that many of our doctors will wait until they're ready to sell the practice before they really make a push to bring someone in and to buy the practice and for them to exit quickly. And that's what led to many practices closing or selling to other entities outside of a private buyer. So for the last 7 years or so, what we've done is tried to educate our doctors that it's better to engage our team and our consultants, talented doctors like Dr. McCling, who can help them to create a strategic path over a 3, 5, 7 year plan to try to not only maximize the value of their practice, but to recruit the right type of doctor to come in, but also to bring in technology that can help them be more efficient and maybe less dependent on their physical, what's better, one or two body, and more thinking along the lines of how do I actually care for the patients that I'm seeing in a more efficient manner. And that brings value to the practice. It advances the practice and allows for transition. When we don't do those things and the practice still looks like it's 1975, it's very challenging. I mean, you could almost just buy a practice across the street or set up one and be just as competitive, right, in that market, which we would hate to do to someone. Much rather transition.
It's interesting, and this is where a trend that I'm seeing in rural America is that, there are a lot of smart practice owners that are saying we can't increase capacity by adding ODs, but we can maybe add, remote exams or something like that. How are you seeing technology support kind of the areas that are toughest in some cases to staff well?
Yeah. I think we're on a medical technology evolution at the moment. You're seeing technology that's coming in to try to drive better diagnostics, more efficiency, and less demand on a person to run the test, right? So that's great because you can reduce your dependency on the number of folks that you need to care for a patient. So one thing you can do is just simply create a more streamlined, less stops along the chain in order to see a patient, right? So you have a multi-test unit, you have AI-backed units that can drive themselves, and you can drive that efficiency in care, and the doctor can not have to do so much, basically. That's one aspect that we're seeing. So how are we doing that? We're looking at all the high-tech partners that we have and starting to create that gold standard of efficiency for our members. So writing the protocol of how do you care for a patient A to Z will be very important for us over the next couple of years. But we're having the conversation today with our members through education, protocols, what have you. The second is just understanding that while remote care has a fantastic opportunity in certain cases, it's not replacing the doctor. That's not the aim. It's, do you solve for a lack of a provider by adding that to a current practice? Because we don't have dark practices, generally speaking. We're not retail. What we have is a doctor who's struggling. No time off ever, no backup plan. I'm shutting down when I'm not there. Or maybe I have 2 months of patients waiting and I'd like to get to them sooner. Are we able to go side by side and create some efficiencies where the doctor can see the patient? Maybe the medical patient in the chair is being seen while the refractive is seen in the next lane, and then a scheduled follow-up with a doctor, and create that multiplier in the way they care for patients. So I see it as a real add-on, but a hub and spoke model is being used by several of our members where they'll have a larger practice and they'll buy a couple of rural practices and try to bring them in and have scheduled live patient care throughout the week with adjunct remote care to support that.
Got it. And on this topic of, because you're kind of talking about two things. You're talking about technology, but you're also talking about these, kind of impending threats to the industry. So maybe we'll get to the opportunities in a moment, but let's talk about the challenges that are really facing the whole industry, because we started with challenges that are facing the practice. Totally get that. Maybe there's more, and maybe those expound to challenges that fully face the whole industry.
Yeah. When we talk about disruptors, right, and the encroachment into optometry, one of the challenges is really one of the problems is self-induced. When we don't care for the patients that need our care, right, when we are not able to see them because we don't have enough providers, or that maybe we are not focused on their conditions, someone will fill that void, right? One of the big threats I see is that others outside of optometry will see an opportunity to leverage diagnostic equipment to say that they've done an eye exam, right? And
you mean like a PCP, or do you mean like a contact lens company, or what?
I love how you want to push me to that corner. I think I think that you're going to see, if you look at our ophthalmology colleagues, right, and you've got a low number of ophthalmologists, and there's no way they can meet the demand, right?
So true, yeah.
And they're going to have patients who need procedures that are not currently in the scope for optometry, but yet fighting hard to keep optometry out of treating patients that really need something as simple as a YAG procedure. I think that it's possible that if we don't advance our profession, if we don't fight legislatively to get those across the line in all 50 states, what we're going to find is that soon you'll have an NP doing that procedure, and more you'll see that because, well, it's under the supervision of an ophthalmologist. What we need to do is to understand that that's not great for care for the patients, that in fact optometrists have the highest level of knowledge of that patient's physical and the structure of the eye for us to be able to learn those procedures and to do it well. I would put an optometrist against anyone to be able to perform those procedures. And so we're seeing that trend, but we're in 13 states or something like that, or maybe growing, but we need to get that across the line.
No, and I've had some folks who have important roles in various parts of the AOA and affiliates talk a lot about that on the show. Is that we have to start with the patient first and realize that if there's an unmet need by the current collective of doctors and the current collective of we'll call it procedural bureaucracy, then maybe we need to address that first and just make sure that what's best for the patient is really what we keep in mind as the industry.
I wholeheartedly agree. I was involved in push for the North Carolina bill that didn't go through, but to see the argument that was made against optometry and for it to stand was truly an exercise of futility, because it hurt the patients. The patients who were now going to have to travel 2 hours to go and get care and wait 6 months, when there is a optometrist in the community that is incredibly capable and treating disease every day, all day. and isn't able to do a simple procedure, right? And I think that's one challenge. Look, the other major challenge we face is this idea that there is someone that would interfere with the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship. I am a big believer that the greatest way to care for a patient is to be in a 100% owned doctor-owned organization, and your responsibility to that patient is paramount. The buck stops with me. I care for the patient. I have to make sure that that patient's interest is first. And if I decide the patient doesn't need anything, it's because that's the right thing, right? But when you have to answer someone outside the door, in a situation where maybe you're not independent, I jokingly say you're dependent. Sorry, I know that probably offends some folks, but I think that when you have to answer someone outside the door, you really breach that trust with the patient. Because if you're counting number of things you've sold or the procedures you've done, well, we've lost our connection to the patient. So I would always argue that a doctor who practices in a private setting, who owns the practice, really is the biggest patient advocate.
Hmm. And so you see that, I mean, continuing to be a major threat. And, I guess as I'm thinking about it, technology enables both, right? Because technology, and there's most people who listen to the show will know that I'm a huge advocate of AI. I'm a huge advocate of finding creative solutions or leveraging what's available from a technology standpoint, whether it's to drive patients to your practice or whether to take care of those patients better. Huge advocate of technology. What's interesting as we're talking about these threats is that I see your statement from a different perspective. You're saying, hey, technology can enable someone who's not a doctor to make, or who's not an optometrist,
Mm-hmm.
to operate in our realm and make decisions, or technology can force someone, can try to falsely enable somebody to tell optometrists what to do because they think they're empowered with technology.
Mm-hmm. No, very true. I often find myself looking at AI and technologies that improve the diagnostic capacity of doctors as a double-edged sword. But I would like to believe that if you put the patient interest first and you truly understand as a doctor that everything that we have gained over the last 20, 30, 40 years in technology has really given us the opportunity to treat more patients, take better care of our patients, and frankly has made optometry what it is today. That technology has not been the threat, that the threat is really human behavior. So if we're able to take technology that gives me diagnostic data on a patient and can interpret my OCT and put it against my retinal, photographs, and then look at the patient's demographics and gauge risk of disease, and tells me this is a patient you probably want to pay attention to because of all these factors, I'm a better doctor. And frankly, it lowers my liability because now I can take care of that patient better than ever. So for me, it's always been an enabler. As a
Mm-hmm.
high technology practice. But I can see where you can substitute someone else and say we did an eye exam because our diagnostic equipment told us that this patient doesn't have retinopathy. And all of a sudden, I don't need an eye doctor anymore. I'd like to not focus too hard on that. I really believe at this moment, we need our doctors to own optometry's opportunity. Look, this is an amazing moment. We couldn't ask for more. You have a profession that has matured to this point through hard-earned legislative fights and has proven itself to be the best it can possibly be with very little worries about patient outcome litigation. What you're finding is a profession that's firing at all cylinders when it comes to taking great care of patients, and an aging population with more disease that needs us more than ever, and ophthalmology not being able to supply the care they must provide, and technology that helps us be more efficient. My goodness, like it's all in front of us. Oh, by the way, we also have a lot of children who need us to take care of them better than ever and actually change their future health by taking care of their myopia today. I mean, is optometry rich with opportunity or what? I'm serious. Like, it is just an amazing moment for us to be in. And if we get scared of technology, shame on us.
Yeah,
We need to be.
it's fantastic. I was going to ask you about the opportunity, but I think you literally just laid it all out right there. As I think you're absolutely right. We have, and I've heard multiple people talk about this on the show, and I personally hold the belief that in today's environment, especially with how globally, well, maybe not globally, but at least in the U.S., there is more demand for care, and it continues to grow, and substitutes haven't caught on. I do demand analysis with my team on a regular basis, and it looks like online exams and online eyewear shopping trends have diminished year after year after year, whereas local demand in general continues to go up and up and up. And it's absolutely right, because there's more patients as the population ages. There's more patients who need care from eye doctors. And it's up to us to be able to deliver that, to be able to educate that patient what's the best place for them to get that care, and to help provide a care, an experience that really gets them optimal outcomes.
Oh, you said it. That nails it. You know, I wanted to share with you that one of those principles that have really stuck with me is um, every generation believes the next generation cares less about interactions, society, um, and connections. But it's never been true that, in fact, they're judging the next generation too soon. That given time, we all believe in the same thing, that we're all bound by the same rules, that we care for people, we want interactions, we feel significant when we're cared for, and that if we trust people, we're willing to stay with them. So I think it's about building that trust. And I think myopia gives us that incredible opportunity. Talk about building a lifetime relationship with a patient. Dr.
Well,
Brett
let's talk
Hagen.
about myopia management. I heard you talk. I heard you mention it. So obviously, you're a big believer in that being part of the future for the industry. I already heard you mention dry eye as well, but it does seem like specialty care, as some people call it, and I think it makes sense to just look at it as holistic care, but myopia seems to be a big part of the equation for you. What have you learned, and what have practices that you have access to, what have they learned about the optimal solutions for myopia management, and really, the optimal solutions for getting parents to buy into myopia management? Because it's a lot of money we're asking parents to spend.
Absolutely. I'll start by saying this because it's very relevant. One of my good friends told me years back that if you do things right, then you can look at a patient and say, I don't care about the next $15. I care about the next 15 years of your life. And I think that's a really great way to approach even myopia. You can take the easy route and put a pair of regular specs on a kid who's myopic and has all the risk factors for becoming a progressive myope with a lot of risk. But I think we owe our citizens something better. I think we owe our children. As a father of three who are still in the house, I can tell you that I would be terribly disappointed if doctors were simply taking the easy route to treat my kids as opposed to looking at their long-term care. So when you own the responsibility as a profession, when you say that my responsibility is for this child to develop into an adult without the risk of retinal detachment and myopic degeneration, right? Then we have to build practices that understand the science and understand the right treatment for the child and understand the right risk. If we wing it, if we just go into it and say that every myope needs this care, I think you lose trust of the community, and it's not really the right way to practice. So what we did for, I think it was in 18 when we launched our myopia initiative, and then have built a world-class protocol with KOLs who truly studied every single thing you can, and then created an execution model at the practice level. That's one of the wonderful things we do is we say, here's all the literature, here's the latest thinking, and here's the easy button on how to treat, say, myopia level 1, 2, 3, because some people will go into it and it becomes their practice, right? That's sort of a level 3 thinking. Whereas level 1 is, look, it's just part of what I offer. I'm not going to become a myopia practice.
Hmm.
And that really worked well for us because we have a lot of practices who maybe don't believe they have enough kids, but they want to do the right thing. So by giving them the tools and educating the staff, we've built a myopia portion of their practice. It's not all or none, right? And the other side of it that's worked well is we have a lot of collaborative sessions throughout the country where doctors get together and talk about what works. So we're not just reading it or listening to a video, but we're actually having real conversation in a community about this is how I introduced the idea. This is how we'd set up the consultation. These are the peripherals. This is the education tool I'll give them to take home. This is the vision source asset that we use. And then we set up an appointment. We sit down with the family and we discuss the case. This is how I would create a protocol based on finances, what have you. But we're seeing that spread throughout the network. And I'm so excited about the opportunities ahead with spectacle lenses entering the market. I think that's going to be a nice gateway for us to walk through and be able to treat a lot more patients.
As a as an industry or even as a membership, because obviously you have thousands of members, are how much more myopia do you feel that you are treating this year versus last year versus the year before that? Are parents becoming finally a little bit more solution aware, or are doctors continuing to educate parents for the first time?
I think that it's a slow climb right now. I think the solutions that we have are not necessarily easy. Whether it's atropine or whether it's specialty contact lenses, it's not particularly easy, or it's the soft lens. But I believe that the number is growing. We know that within our network, and I think in the profession, I'm sure, but within our network, we have more and more attention to myopia throughout all of our meetings, and the desire for doctors to implement is at a higher level. I wish I had a number for you. I actually don't. I probably could look it up, but I just didn't come prepared with that. But I can tell you that the decision to bring myopia in and truly in a way that treats myopia today as a multi-stage and multi-approach condition, um, we've never had more attention than we do today. So the appetite is there.
Hmm. Got it. And speaking of numbers, what numbers do you typically pay attention to at the membership level as an organization? And then what numbers do you think each individual practice owner should really be paying attention to if they're looking to, as you said, protect themselves against some of the dangers and some of the threats facing the industry, but also to continue to grow and fully serve their patient base and grow their practice?
Okay. I'll start with what we look at. I think our member success, we measure several ways. We look at their year over year growth to see if they're continuing to grow their practice. Many can be very happy not growing their practice, but for us at the network level, we like to see year over year same practice growth as a barometer of success. Another one that we feel very strongly about is their uptake of key practice centric programs that we know require a team approach to implement, because that tells us there's a strong leadership in the practice that allows them to uptake something that frankly there's a little bit of a skin in the game, but when they do it they usually will outperform those who don't. So it's a barometer of leadership, I think, and staff development. And the other thing that it's critically important for us is to understand, are we able to look at the practice's position in that market as meeting the needs of the community, right? So do we have enough providers in any given community that we think we can meet the needs of the community? So from a network perspective, very selfishly, we want to know, are we driving success at the practice level? So that's how we look at vision source practices. Of course, transition is a critical thing that we look at. Are they in a position where they're at risk? Are they rural? Are you aging doctor? We want to make sure we reach out and try to help support them at the practice level. I think all of us look at things like revenue per patient always first, because it's a great way for us to see, are we treating the patient and and solving for all their needs all at one time, right? Of course, I know there are folks who are more metric oriented than I am, but very much a practice owner and still strongly believe that you got to look at your capture rate, you've got to look at your revenue per patient, you've got to see what your fill rate is on a daily basis, you've got to see how far you're booked out. I tend to lean more toward the trends that tell me whether or not we're caring for the community and the patients that are in our chair, and less about, let's just say, revenue per staff member. I know that sounds crazy because some people would tell you that's the most important thing. To me, it's always been more important to have patients who are loyal to the practice, who care deeply about what we do, and in return, right? Because that's how you build a practice that has continued to grow year after year after year. And revenue per patient is just a number that tells me, did we care for all the needs of the patient? Did we provide the solutions that they need? Sorry, that was long-winded, wasn't it?
No, that's great. That's good. And I think that, honing in on the numbers is always fun for me because anybody who's still practicing has their own little take on it. And, you get this really unique viewpoint of, I'm looking at 3,000 practices and I'm also looking at one. What do I care about in each of those cases? So that's great. Amir, it's been a great conversation. If you were to leave the audience with, maybe one insight or one, kind of what I'd like to call, global golden nugget, what would that be? And where do you think we're headed as an industry?
Great question. I would say that our profession is really in need of strong leadership. I think that we need to understand our value, and that comes in every aspect of optometry, no matter where you practice or how you practice. I think you carry the flag of optometry, and we need to be really aware that together we can advance this profession where we need to go. We cannot stay stale. We can't remain where we are and watch the world change around us. And so for me is, no matter where you are, support the profession. Be really involved in every way you possibly can, whether it's at the state level or the federal or the national level, or even at the local level. Understand that doctor leadership is infectious, that if we were to do it, the next generation will. And if you just simply point out someone who's young and full of potential, identify those high potential young ODs, and show them that you believe in them. That's how I got my start. Dr. Scott Philippi put his finger right on my chest and said, "You're serving for the state society." And I kid you not, I looked behind me. I was like, is he talking to me or something? And it was that moment of truth for me that somebody believed in me, right? And it just continued to evolve over the years. But what I worry about is a lack of leadership, because you get caught up in, I just go to work, clock in and clock out and go home. I think we can move this profession forward. And I think the next 10 years, the most exciting 10 years ahead of us.
That's fantastic. I love that. Well said. And I very much appreciate your insights today on the Power Hour. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to future conversations as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, it's Eugene, and I've got a question for you. Do you do medical billing in your practice? What if we took 10 charts and looked at them pretty closely? Would they be good enough to pass an audit, or would you owe the insurance company some money? Or would there be some found revenue that you could put back in your pocket? So looking at 10 charts is a new service that's now available from the Power Practice, and it's called the Power Audit. What happens during the Power Audit is that some of the most knowledgeable billing experts in the country are going to do a friendly audit on your charts and see if they can find opportunities. By the way, in auditing hundreds of charts, 9 out of 10 charts they look at, they find something. And typically that something fits into 2 categories. 1, something that better protects your practice, or 2, something that can make you more money. In fact, almost every single audit they do uncovers underbilling areas where you can get paid more for what you already did. So let's just play it out. You send them your medical charts, and a few weeks later, they provide you with a detailed report, an analysis, a write-up, a coaching guide that helps you prevent any issues in the future. And again, helps you get paid more for what you're already doing while protecting your practice. So if you're doing any amount of medical billing in your practice, this is a service that's well worth the $2,500 it costs. And as a limited time opportunity, 10 listeners from this episode can get a $700 savings certificate for the power audit. So the price is only $17.99, but the opportunities that the power audit uncovers are worth many, many, many multiples of that. So go to the Power Practice website. Up near the top, you can click Request a Power Audit. Now, you're not committing to pay anyone at that point. You're just locking in your $700 savings. But you will get a chance to schedule a 10-minute phone call to get your questions answered and to see if the power audit is a fit for your practice. Again, that's the power audit on thepowerpractice.com.